All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this fine Friday morning and in this non-traditional way. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us for this very important topic. It's one that we venture into once a year to really promote the plan of work, and we thought that it would be a good idea to share a little bit more insight on this, given that we're about to go into the 4-year plan. Pam and I have done several trainings on this over the years and in recent months to focus on plan of work, evaluation, program development, and so it was suggested, and we thought it was a good idea also to provide some information, just because we're right here at the very beginning of getting things moving. So we really appreciate your time. So this morning we're going to hope that it would be a dialogue. So feel free to chime in through the chat. There will also be times when you can unmute your mic to ask questions, so that we can make sure that we're getting at the points that you're wanting to address. So thanks again. Next slide, Pam. Okay, so one thing that I did want to note is that there have been a few changes, and we'll talk about those today. With the plan of work, there is a timeline. Again, as I mentioned, we've got a 4-year plan of work stretch that we focus on, and each year there's an opportunity to update. And so this year, the assistant directors have taken the time to work with their specialists in their respective program areas to identify new resources, new major programs. Hopefully you all have had a chance to see some of those. If you haven't, make sure you do, because there have been some significant changes. So some of those major programs that you may have used in the past are not there anymore. So make sure you take heed to that. So they have been working, as I said, with specialists over the past year. They've developed the logic models, evaluation tools, so that you can utilize with your clientele. And I think some of those are in electronic survey forms, so they could be used if you're interacting with your clientele via Zoom or other creative ways that you're reaching them. Feel free to follow up if you have some questions about that with your assistant directors. We're still looking at the same process where the plans of work are submitted to the district directors for review. And you should have received an email from me within the past 2 weeks or so indicating that we have extended the time frame for the deadline for the plan of work. And reason being is because I know that there are several counties that, because there were so many things going on over the past couple months now, that some of you may not have had an opportunity to meet with your program councils and then your extension councils to sort of prioritize the issues that are pertinent in your communities. And so with the plan of work, in my mind, and I'm pretty sure Dr. Stevenson agrees, I know Pam agrees, a plan of work does not exist if it does not have the feedback from the people that you're serving. So we don't want any county to just create a plan of work without that grassroots process structure in place. So we want to give you the time to do adequate justice in working with those individuals. So we moved that deadline for the submission of the plan of work from June 30 to August 1st. Now, that does not say that those of you who are ahead of the curve, and I know that there are several of you that are already ready to go, you've had your meetings, and so you're ready to put your information in, you can do that. We do have that window open. It was open April 1st, as it has been in the past, for you to submit your plans of work. But again, as far as that getting to your district directors, you may want to follow up with your district director with the time frame. Typically, they indicated anywhere from I'm looking here on what it says on the form here, but it really has varied among the district directors. Some say they want to see it by May 1st, your draft. Some say May 15. So check with your respective district directors to see when they are setting their deadline for you to get your draft of the plan of work to them, so that it can be entered by no later than August 1st. But again, if you want to submit it before that, you can do that at any time. Just communicate that with your district director. So next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
There we go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so again, with the plan of work, what you all may be familiar with, we oftentimes have those conversations with our counties, and it's more of a plain sheet type of approach. And by that I mean we put those flip charts on the wall, and we hope that our counties will tell us all the things that we need to start focusing on, some of the issues that we may not be as aware of. In most counties, I'm pretty sure you are, but we still want to make sure that they can voice their opinions about things that they consider to be important when it comes to programming. Continue to do that, but also know that you have a community assessment that was conducted that provides a lot of good information per county. And so in part, that process was done to some degree, where we provided a venue for counties, communities, individuals to provide feedback on what the pertinent issues were in your county. So I would start with that community assessment website, as Pam will get into here in just a moment, to start those conversations, because you've got a lot of information right there at your fingertips that you can use to generate a good discussion about what you need to be focusing on when it comes to the plan of work over the next 4 years. I will say that given that we've been impacted by COVID-19, that may not be in your community assessment. But if it's a pertinent issue, and I think for most of us it is, if that's something that you now want to include in your plan of work, I think now is the time to really talk about what we're going to do as far as the aftermath is concerned. Right now, we're being proactive in addressing some of those things to meet the needs of our folks right now. But you know, the after effects are going to be going on for some time. So I would encourage you, as you think about your plan of work, what are you going to be doing as a result of what's occurring right now? And I think there's a lot of work that we can address, a lot of things that Extension can do and is doing. And so consider those things for your plan of work as well. So engage those councils and making sure that they're helping you with that process. Pam?
So we want the plans of work to include all the agents within your county. I think back when we started the FCS initiatives, some agents thought they had to have all 7 of the FCS initiatives, and some had their own programs. And I worked with a county that has fairly new agents, and they had like 13 plans of work, which is just way too many to have. So the ideal situation for a county with 3 agents is to have 4 to 6 plans of work. Now, if there's more agents than that in the county and some of the bigger population counties, you know, you want to adjust accordingly. And what I always like to go back to is to plan smartly, be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely as you set your objectives and your goals for these plans of work. And I always think of a plan of work as a contract between the agents in that office and their the county people. So you want to make sure that what you put in that plan of work is something you're going to be able to accomplish during that time. Don't set the goals so high that you're not going to be able to meet them. And some of your counties may be short an agent. So I think it's always important to know where all the resources are for all the different program areas. So as I mentioned, FCS has the 3 initiatives. If you're not familiar with the FCS website, you go to the Agent Internal button on that website, then go to Program Planning tab, then Situation, Major Programs, and they have resources, evaluations, and the specialist contact information. And they'll actually list all the different curriculums that they have and the evaluation tools that have already been developed by this specialist. So please take advantage of that as you start looking at how you're going to do your plan of work. For Ag and Natural Resources, this was, I worked a lot this year with the specialists in all these different areas. Some provided more input than others, but for every, and one of the things we did was we reduced the number of priority indicators and added areas where agents said that they, in the past, that they had no place to report some of the practices that they conduct. So they've been changed a lot. Excuse me, my allergies are getting to me. If you're working with ag and horticulture, be sure that you look. There's new program indicators, new numbers. We've reduced the indicators, provided some new ones, but there is a logic model for each major program area. There is a sample evaluation and a sample success story for you. And then for 4-H, if you go to the 4-H Youth Development, you go to one of their program areas, and under each program area, you'll see on the far left-hand side of their screen, a logic model, an evaluation, a sample success story, and some other plan of work resources that they provide for you. So if there's not an agent that is familiar with their program area, you can look at that to make sure that all areas are included. As Ken mentioned, the top priorities for the state are very similar when you look at the different county pieces, but be familiar with your county information. Ken mentioned with the effects of the coronavirus and what we're going through. So jobs and infrastructure, health and wellness, and life skills are going to be, particularly important, I think, coming up. So one of the things I do when I work with counties, or sometimes when I work with groups who take my logic model training, is I have this little template that I've been using where I plug in the community assessment priorities for that county, which you can find on the internal extension internal website. Then I like to use kids count, and so I'll send this handout to you. You can go to that link, and then you'll be able to select your county information. And I put in here the average for Kentucky, which is the most current information, and then you can then determine if it's an increase or a decrease, and it's there for you. So that's some information that you might want to include into that situation statement, as well as information for the 2017 Census of Agriculture. And I like to use Data USA. Now, it may be particularly helpful because it lists all the different, the most common jobs in your county, the best paying jobs in your county, and it has a lot of economic information, and CEDIC has a lot of that information for you as well. Then the other one I use is Kentucky Health Data. And here again, you can go in there and go to your county. But when you go to that one, when you click on click your county, it'll pull up some information. There's going to be like a yellowish gold box on the left-hand side, which will say demographics. And you want to click all of those so that you get all the county information instead of the basic information. And I've already put in the state averages for some of those. And there may be other indicators on there that you might want to use as well. So when we start doing the logic model, it's going back to, or to the plan of work, we're using a logic model. Excuse me. So you want to think about the situation in your county, and the priorities is where your community partners, your advisory groups, your councils are going to help you prioritize what you're going to do. But you need to think about what the situation is right now, so that data that I was just talking about really is great to help you create that situation statement. Then when we look over here at what resources do you have, what activities, and who your target audience is, then we're looking at your outcomes, as well as assumptions, external factors, and evaluation. And all that information is going to be asked for by you on that plan of work. But keep in mind that it doesn't have to be a straight across activity as you fill out the blanks. A lot of times I'll start off with my situation, then I'll come over here to these outcomes, which may be your community assessment outcomes, one or two of those, and then sort of work toward the center as I do that. So as I said, your logic model template and your plan of work are very similar. It's going to start off by asking you your situation. And when we look at situations, if you go to some of the resources, that you have on your different program area websites. The specialists have given you a state sort of overview, but what is really, you want to make this your plan of work, so you might want to add, make it county specific. So maybe for this one, for leadership, I might want to go back to the most current information I can have, maybe, and these are all, it's all information you can get from kids count, would be kindergarten readiness, 4th grade reading, 8th grade math, high school graduation. Those might be some data that you want to add into it as well. Same thing with leadership. When this was the one that was on the FCS before it was updated. I haven't gotten the newest one, sorry. But this was a statement that was on their leadership logic model prior to this, where it had the number of homemaker members, master clothing volunteers, and champion food volunteers. Well, you could use that same guide, that same piece as a guide for your county, but then you're going to put your county numbers in instead. So let's say we were going to do a plan of work on job infrastructure and community vitality. Some of those and some of the outcomes overlap. When I've worked with some specific counties, we've sort of combined those into one plan of work. And so some of the data that we used was the unemployment rate, the average median income, who were the major employers, average age, what percent of workers who commute into the county and those who commute out of the county. I think some of the static data there, such as the digital divide, the access to internet and things like that, might be information that you would want to include if that was your plan of work. Then it goes to your long-term outcomes. So for that, you could very easily use some of the outcomes or the top priorities that are from that community assessment, such as more good paying jobs, more qualified employees, more qualified leaders for the future, and more citizens helping to solve local issues there. So those might be things that you're going to do. Then it's going to ask you those learning opportunities. And this is where you identify your target audience, the activities you have planned, curriculum input, and when you're going to offer this. And this is where I think is one of the areas where your county advisory committees and groups can be the most important. And if we have time, we're going to talk about, I'll show you a template that I've used too, where you could provide some of this information with a template to all your partners if you're unable to meet together. And one of the things that, one of the questions that came up when I was working with a county was how many learning opportunities are appropriate to be listed, because with this group, we did some brainstorming and they had like 50 different activities and programs that team of agents would like to do, but it's not realistic that they're going to be able to do that many. So one of the idea or the suggestions I would give you is that for each program area, if you have 3 to 5 activities that you're going to do during the year toward that plan of work would be appropriate. So if there's 3 agents and you each put in 3 or 4, you're talking about anywhere from 12 to 20 activities that you're going to have under your learning opportunities. So if this is the equine logic model. So my audience here might be that I have recreational clients is who my audience is. I'm going to conduct workshops, demonstrations, or do farm visits. And from this menu, and this is where the resources that the specialists have provided you, I always consider that a menu for you to select from to come up with our ideas. So these would be intermediate outcomes, and all of these have to do with for the forage area, where they're testing soil, selecting forage, rotational grazing, and those things. And my indicator then is I go back to my priority indicators. And so one of the indicators under equine would be the number of equine owners or operators who adopted a best practice to improve or maintain animal nutrition. Because if you improve your forage, that's what you're trying to do, is improve your animal's health and nutrition. So it'd be done by a follow-up evaluation. And one of the things we did with ag is we surveyed the agents who volunteered to be our reviewers, and May was suggested as a good time to do that each year. So with most of your areas, it's going to have a logic model that divides things up as to initial, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. For ag, we put together a little cheat sheet where we color-coded it with whether it was an initial, intermediate, or long-term outcome. And you're going to have more initial outcomes. There'll be probably less intermediate outcomes, but those are the important ones that we're aiming toward. And we always want to try to get to those long-term outcomes. And from reading success stories, what I find is a lot of times you're doing long-term outcomes, but you don't consider it that way. So you need to remember that long-term outcome is making a social, economic, environmental, or a civic contribution to the community. So here's another example with 4-H using that leadership model again. So their target audience are their teen 4-H members. Their activity is going to be leadership development. Their content or curriculum is going to be teen conference, camp counseling, and then it's done each year from May to June or during the summer months. So here you go. Then you're asked to talk about your evaluation. What outcomes are you looking for? What are the indicators that you're going to report it under? What is the method that you're going to use to evaluate? And the timeline in which you're going to do evaluations. So when we look at these outcomes here, if we were going back to that 4-H model, their senior members will lead a 4-H project club, or they're going to be a camp counselor at a day camp, or they're going to teach younger youth. Then here are their indicators that would be reported under. And their method is from leader records, camp records, and testimonials. And their timeline is it's going to be done as part of their annual report. One of the things I always like to go back to is Bloom's taxonomy. And those of you who may not be education majors, people in education use Bloom's taxonomy to develop higher levels of learning. And that's what we do with initial, intermediate, and long-term outcomes. So if you use verbs that are from the knowledge and understanding part of Bloom's taxonomy, that's an initial outcome where they're setting the base of their learning opportunities. And if you use the verbs from the higher parts of the pyramid on Bloom's taxonomy, you're going to intermediate outcomes when you're doing that. So the way you word it and how you describe what you've done has a lot to do with what level of outcome that you're going to have. So when we're looking at that evaluation, when you're doing engagement activities and hands-on activities, doing a quiz or a competition, you're doing your evaluation. It doesn't always have to be a piece of paper and a pencil, although that's what we have a tendency to rely on. And photo documentation is a great way to do it. When I do the logic model training, I always use an example from McCreary County where they did a Facebook post, and those photos that they included in their Facebook post was their evaluation, and I was able to write a success story from what I observed in the photos that are being done. So I always suggest that. When you're doing an immediate after evaluation at the end of a program, we have a retrospective or a pre-post evaluation that we keep up on the program and staff development website, and we can show you that if you need it toward the end of the program. But it could be that you also do an evaluation by starting if you're doing a series of classes, when you begin your next class, you ask the question of what they did since they were here last week or 2 weeks ago, and what they've accomplished. And or you could just ask them at the end of a program, okay, what are the 3 things that you learned tonight, and what do you still want more information about, and what are you going to do when you get ready to go home? And so when you look at that retrospective pre-post test, 4-H people probably recognize this because I think most of the sample evaluations that 4-H uses is this template kind of format. But we have it in both a Word document and a Google document, and you can style it for what works best for you. I would never have more than 4 things here at the top, which is what did they know, where they rate themselves before they started the program and after the program. And even in the 4-H ones, this is sort of left open for you to customize to the program that you're using. Then the behavior change, the good part about having that on this retrospective is you're ending your program, you're sort of reminding them of what you want them to do when they go home. For 4-H, those are set as common measures is what are used for those for you, as well as providing a formative evaluation of was the information relevant, and the speakers, how did the speakers do, and leaves a place for them to open questions.
Pam?
Yes.
There was one question about competitions. And competitions, more specifically, I'm assuming here in 4-H, being used as an intermediate outcome because they're applying their skills.
Yes, yes. So think about what, you have judges like at the speech competition, they have done the evaluation for you. They've evaluated those youth when they've done that competition. So those rubrics that we use for 4-H is your evaluation because you have that to use. So sometimes agents, when you get those judges sheets back, for example, look at that because that's your evaluation information that they've provided you. They've done the evaluation for you. Does that make sense?
Well, there's also some talk about what they learn through their club meetings.
Yeah.
So can they apply their skills that they learned in their club meeting through competitions?
Correct. Here, this is, and I'll show you this in a Word document form, but I was working with Sarah Stoltz. Sarah, I know, is on here. She was doing a series of activities, and so each time she met with the group, it's not always the same number of people who were there. So by making sort of a lesson plan, but also a checkoff sheet for yourself to document what you accomplished that day. We looked here, some of these are what we call soft skills, where they worked in groups. They did some critical thinking by comparing labels, and she can check off what she has done that day. Also, we're looking at cognitive skills with a lot of our groups. For youth, you want to think about the cognitive skills that they've used, but also those of you who are working with seniors or people in rehabilitation groups, trying to work on their cognitive skills is always really important as well. So sometimes if you make yourself a lesson plan where you can check off what you accomplished or observed during that lesson, can also work as an evaluation form for you. And we did a lot of this with the community gardening part of it. We developed it, and I'm going to end this just a minute and bring over some Word documents that I have here for you. One of the things that happens is a lot of times we, as agents, you are asked to do community gardens in all program areas. And so you want to help out, but you need to think about what is the purpose of doing this gardening project, and where is it going to be located? Who's going to be using the garden, and what kind of garden are they wanting to have? And what do you want to accomplish from it? That's something else to think about. And who's going to be doing all the work? So this is a form that is on the Ag Plan of Work materials under Community Gardening, which you may find helpful, as well as, let me pull up this other one. When we talk about evaluations, it's not always the client that we need to evaluate. It may be the community partner. And I think and when I do logic model, I use truth and consequences as an example here. But let's say I was working with a senior center, since we have a lot of FCS agents on it. If I'm doing a program at a senior center, these people are in an institutional setting. Many of them have had life changes, and many of them are there because they lost a spouse and no longer together. So those might be something that, and this is sort of designed more to be used with your community partner as the evaluation, not your clients. So that might be something when you want to describe who your target audience is. We talk about some of the different activities. Think about what are the physical or the goals that you want to accomplish when you do that gardening project. Maybe for that senior, I want them to increase their stamina, maybe work on their gross motor skills and their hand and eye coordination. And so if I was going to think of work with that community partner and play my evaluation, I may want to narrow that down to maybe 2 or 3 things that I want to do there. Then think about the emotional and psychological.
Pam, I'm sorry. We've got someone that's on the phone that needs to mute their phone. There's a number here that I'm seeing. I don't know who it is, but they need to mute. Sorry.
That's okay. Then we look at the emotional psychological improvement that we want people to improve. So with that senior audience, I might want them to increase their feelings of competence, maybe have some more self-confidence, and maybe reconnect. One of the groups in a success story I read with a garden at a senior center said that the families started sitting at the garden when they came to visit, and they started talking about old times and connected and told family stories and things like that from being in that garden. So that was one of the goals of that garden. And then we think about those cognitive skills again, their ability to hold their attention, remember things from one visit to another, use logic and reasoning, that you're able to give them oral directions and they can follow it. Visual processing, where you give them directions and they complete it, they get it done, and they get it done on time. So, so that these are tools that are on the community garden and horticulture therapy that has been developed with the input from Bethany Pratt, from Sarah Stoltz, and some of the other agents that have been involved in this that we've worked with over the last few years. So this is an example of the commercial horticulture piece that we have for ag agents. And so I'm going to use it as an example, but I think probably the evaluation tools that you have for your other areas would work the same. But on this one, we put every program indicator that we could imagine somebody who was doing commercial horticulture would use for an evaluation. But it's not always appropriate to ask those questions in that wording for the client. So for example, with water quality and soil health, an agent knows what a best practice is for soil quality and soil health, but is that really understandable by a client? Probably not. So you would want to edit these, and all these are going to be in Word, are in Word documents right now, and they'll be available in Qualtrics later on. But you can reword it or make that evaluation your own. So you can edit those evaluations that have been provided for you. So this, Dr. Kenny Burdine, for the beef farm management area, he wanted these 5 questions answered because these are things that he's promoting when he's going out doing programs for counties or areas. But those 3 questions at the top would then go under the program indicator applied marketing techniques. And these 2 at the bottom then would be long-term outcomes that you would report under increased profits, reduced expenses, or reduced risk. So you want to make sure that when you use the evaluation tools provided by the specialist, that they are understandable and relevant to what you're teaching in your programs. And all know I read all your success stories. Think about your success story as you're developing that plan of work, because a lot of it you're going to be able to put, sort of start off already, what the situation is, who your partners are, which would be your resources, your input that is on that plan of work worksheet, who your target audience is, what curriculum or educational response or activities that you're going to do, and then you're going to look at the initial, intermediate, and long-term outcomes that you have planned for that program. So many of the program area, most major programs will have a sample success story written for you. Keep in mind, when you use those sample success stories, you want to make it relevant to your county by putting some of the county information in it. For this one, I'm sort of showing with the beef, these are the questions that are on the beef evaluation tool, which would then be plugged into this area on their success story. But do you want to put a whole list of all these different outcomes in there? Probably not. I would only want to put 2, maybe 3 initial or intermediate outcomes in here, maybe the top ones that I had, and then have 1 or 2 of the long-term outcomes that I accomplished. And then I always feel like a good success story ends with either a quote from a client or a community partner of how it has impacted that person, because a lot of times that leads to your long-term outcome. Keep in mind that another resource that you have is on the Extension reports page, which you can find on the Extension internal website. And you can look at other counties' plans of work by county or by their program accomplishment code. And when we get to the end, I'm going to go to that website, and you can look at that. And it also has your indicators, program indicators there for you as well. So let me try to tie this a little bit to your county assessment. So if jobs and infrastructure, and these here on the left are the ones that were the state priorities, but notice good paying jobs is one of the large, big pieces to that. So under ag and horticulture, some of the outcomes for farm management would apply to that. For 4-H, workforce preparedness and communication would tie into that. And for FCS, health and nutrition, financial stability, and empowering leader outcomes might all fall into that category. And one of the things I want you to think about are things that you all do a lot, and you don't think of it this way, but you're teaching soft skills. And those soft skills are helping people get jobs. So when you're doing communication skills, when you do teamwork activities, adapting, such as what we're doing here now with online teaching, things, problem solving, creativity, work ethics, interpersonal communications, time management, leadership, and attention to details. These are the top 10 skills that employers are looking for. So when you tie these into your programs that you're doing job and infrastructure activities. When it comes to ag and in the environment, of course, all your ag and horticulture activities could go under this area. But notice one of the things, and I've seen this especially in rural counties, less illegal dumping and littering. So some of the counties are looking at doing cleanup projects as part of that as well, which could tie into healthy homes and communities, as well as 4-H agriculture, natural resources, and STEM activities. When we look at health and wellness, when I've worked with some of the ag agents, they sometimes find it difficult trying to think of how they tie into this, but farm safety activities, environmental programs, and I can see community gardens and home horticulture being a big part of this, because you can increase fruit and vegetable intake, which reduces risk for chronic disease without fruits and vegetables. So I really, with see home horticulture and community garden is falling under health and wellness here. Of course, for FCS, this is one of your areas that you meet a lot as far as accessing nutritious foods, making healthy food choices or healthy lifestyle choices. And then for 4-H, you have your activities under 4-H FCS and 4-H healthy living activities. Under youth and families, basically they're really looking at for career development and life skill activities. And we know that with the coronavirus and what everything's going on, financial programs and financial management is going to be a big area here. So all your different 4-H programs could fall under this. And for FCS, we're looking at your Embracing Life programs, Nurturing Family programs, and Securing Financial Stability programs could fall under that big category. And under Ag and Horticulture, your farm management categories would fall under there as well. When we look at community vitality, those are all your leadership and community development programs. So I've listed there, you know, your a new area for a new major program for agriculture is Ag and Extension Leadership. You have Empowering Leaders, Master Clothing Volunteers, and Champion Foods for 4-H, and then for FCS, and for 4-H you have leadership, communication, and your achievement programs. And for community and leadership development, you have fine arts, first impressions, and community and economic development programs there. So we get back here to that timeline for you that, you know, specialists and assistant directors have worked on this for over a year, trying to get ready and get things updated for you. Be sure that you take time to work with your district directors as well, but keep in mind these district directors, some of them are wearing multiple hats, and they have 14 counties, and every county is going to put in 4 to 6 different plans of work. So you want to give them plenty of time to read and make suggestions to you for you to re-edit your programs through August. Let me mention also that that I have my April 16th morning session for a logic model is full, but there's openings for the 1:30 session. And this week, I try to keep it a smaller group, down to 10 people, so we can ask a lot of questions and do some work together. But there's openings there. And then I'm also offering logic model on April 21st at 9:30 and April 21st at 2, and these are all Eastern time zones. So I'll be glad to work with you there. I also have some set up for May as well, but those are the three that are coming up in this month. We're in the next 2 weeks if you want some additional help on that. So keep in mind when you set those objectives, you want them to be specific to who you're, and your target audience is one of the things that makes it very specific. Make sure it's measurable. Think about how you're going to evaluate it when you set up that outcome. Make sure it's attainable, something that you can achieve. Sometimes we set our heights, our goals a little too high, so make sure it's achievable, make sure it's relevant and meaningful, and then has a target time date for it. So with that, you can go to the Program and Staff Development website. From there, you can find CURS. You can find those extension reports that will include your indicators for you, as well as other resources. So all the plan of work materials are under program and resource or program development resources, and those evaluation tools will be under program evaluation tools.
And some of those we don't have yet. I did see where Sally posted that the FCS POW materials are on the agent internal page for FCS. So I know they're still working on that and trying to get some things finalized. So as soon as we get all the links to all the program area resources, we'll connect that to our page. But in the meantime, you may just want to follow with your assistant director.
So this is a sample of when I've worked with some of the counties. I've used the health and wellness as an example. And then I've selected these 4 major programs so that I had all 3 major program areas included in the health and wellness part. Then I set up a sample situation statement where you could plug in your own county information here, as well as what the health status is of your county. And this is all pretty up-to-date data that's available from those resources I suggested earlier. So my long-term outcome might be youth and adults adopt healthy lifestyle practices to reduce disease. Because we can't.
Let's make sure we mute our phones, even though we love to hear the babies.
So what you might want to do right now is sort of brainstorm. What are activities that you could do in your county for health and wellness? You can type them into the chat box. What are activities that you can do to for health and wellness?
Okay, we're seeing Wait the Reality series, cooking classes, walking programs. Cooking classes. Fitbit challenge is another one. Well, they're really coming in. Adventure clubs. Leap.
I'm not seeing any ag things here, guys. So I'm going to put in some ag things that you could do. Or think.
Sampling at farmers markets, one that came in. Community garden.
Journaling. We're going to get groceries. We're going to battery.
We know what you mean. Trail development.
I'm thinking sun safety, hearing. How about stress management?
Yeah, that covers it.
How about we have a lot of emphasis on substance.
Yeah, substance use. Yeah.
Abuse prevention.
Yeah, we're getting mindfulness and mental health here.
Okay, good. Okay, so this might be something that you do in your county with the agents in your county and brainstorm all these activities. Then you could send these to your advisory groups and community partners, and then they could help vote and prioritize what would be the 15 or 20 things that your county is going to use this upcoming year. And that way you're able to get input from them without that you could send it in advance and have them vote and have a part of it. And from there, then you could develop your intermediate and initial outcomes. So your intermediate outcomes is being physically active 30 minutes a day for 3 or more days a week. Practice safety in home or home, work, or farm settings might be there. Use stress reduction practices. So can you sort of see, and notice that these are all things where we're using intermediate outcome verbs here to do that. And so their initial thing might be to name 3 ways to be physically active without equipment, is an example. Questions and ideas here? For those of you who are with 4-H, another area to look at to help you design some of these might be to look at the Kentucky academic standards and sort of look at some of the standards that the teachers are using. So if you were going into a school to do a program that you're able to tie into their academic standards and use those same standards as your outcomes that you're thinking about. So this is a handout I've got, I created, I think for Sarah Stoltz a while back, that had different age groups and different outcomes that they would have by grade level. And I'll be glad to share that with any of you who would be interested in that. I also wanted to take you to our internal website. So when you go to the internal website, you can go to Extension Reports, and from there you can look at plans of work by county. So if you're a new agent, you may want to go to your mentoring agents county to see how they've written their reports. Here we'll pick on, who should we pick on here? Let's see. Here's Barron County. So those are the plans of work they had for 2019, and then you can look at those if you wanted to. You can also look at it by program accomplishment code. So I can go here, and if I'm interested in, if I'm going to do take ownership of my diabetes, then I can go here and see which other counties that I may be familiar with who had that as part of their plan of work last year, and see what kind of activities they did and what kind of evaluation plan they had. What else was it? Oh, and then program and staff development website. From here, you can go on here to program development, and you'll find all these plans of work resources there for you as well. So any other questions that you have? We're right approaching the end of the hour, so we've got a few minutes here for questions. Ken, do you have any comments or closing remarks?
I think we summarized quite a bit here, but I did want to give people an opportunity to ask any questions. And you already talked about it as far as the number of our programs, maps, program plans that we have per county. And, you know, that's something that comes up quite a bit as far as how many should we have. But it really goes back to the counties coming together and having conversations about what are those targeted programs that folks will be collaborating on. Starting from there and work from there, and I'm pretty sure you'll find that there's a lot of overlap. But again, there is some flexibility for those individual activities and programs that are specific to program areas, but a lot of those could be included under the and Pam mentioned the learning opportunities where it mentions the project activities and the timeline. So you can put your individual programs, activities there instead of recreating a totally new program plan that's specific to one agent. So again, just kind of keep that in mind as well. We did have one question here. It says, will logic models be on the program and staff development webpage?
Yes.
Or will we have to find them in our specific program area resource page? And I mentioned that also. I know that several of them are still working on their resources, but as soon as they provide us the link and the access to where everything is, we will link it to our site. But if you're wanting something right now, which if you're working on your plan of work, that logic model is pretty critical, because you can just pretty much cut and paste the information out of that logic model into your specific program plan that you're working on, or at least get some good ideas. So follow up with your assistant director, and they will put you in contact with the specialist that's working on a specific major program to get that to you in the meantime.
Okay, so here is the Ag and Natural Resource homepage. And if you scroll down, it will say Plan of Work Resources. And from there, you can find all the different resources for Plan of Work, the logic models, the sample evaluations and sample success stories for each major program area. And that was Ag and Natural Resources. For 4-H, if you go to programs and you pick a specific program, let's say Healthy Living, you'll have the logic model will be there, as well as the evaluation and the sample success story for you. When you go to
Of the boogie ball, start dancing for 5
when when you go to Family and Consumer Science,
We're not muted right now.
Yeah.
yours is not working yet.
No, she was just saying about someone not being muted, which I mentioned earlier.
Okay, go to Agent Internal. Then you're going to have to log in with your Link Blue ID.
And it will be unable to get rid of it. Unless they have a shield.
Okay.
There's a note here, Pam, from Lena Mallory about the 4-H resources. She mentioned, and everyone can see it, it says actually click on the 2020 Plan of Work quick link from the home page. It gets you to the information faster.
Oh, okay. All right. So from here, it has your your Plan of Work 2020, and there will be all your tools for FCS then. And so
Get back and watch
we'll
everything.
pick one here. We'll do financial education as an example. Get it open here. And it's actually put it together in a Plan of Work template format for you.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the agents or the specialists and the assistant directors have done a great job trying to provide everybody those resources that they'll need. Mm-hmm. So they're all there. In fact, there's just a lot of stuff there. So it's going to take you a while to get through those.
Yeah.
There
was another question here. Is there a hard and fast rule or even a guideline about having map titles that associate with a variety of initiatives, more specifically FCS and 4-H, or is that up to us? That is up to the counties. The counties come up with their map titles. And so that's why we're saying and we're stressing, have conversations. You know, when you're meeting with your councils, your program councils, your extension councils, you also need to have a meeting with the staff in the office to determine what would be the best map titles to use that will be all encompassing. And again, as I say, work from there as to what you can collaborate on. And then you may have to sort of venture out and kind of come up with some additional maps that may be more specific to a program area. But please try to start with those areas where everyone is addressing a particular issue, because it's a county plan of work. A lot of times we see what really should be individual or agent plans of work or program area plans of work, but this is a county plan of work. And so folks need to come together and have conversations. It's not as easy right now, but we still have Zoom to do that.
And this is where when I've been working with specific counties, some of them said that they just wanted to take their previous plans of work and revise that, and that may be fine. That may work out fine for that county. Others wanted to sort of scrap it and start all over, fresh and new. The counties I worked with the most on an individual basis felt like the community assessment was done for a reason, and they sort of based theirs on the community assessment areas, although they personalized it to their county. So, for example, the new agent in that county was sort of selected because that person had a lot of work experience in natural resources and wildlife and forestry kind of activities. So that's what they changed. They used the community assessment, but instead of calling it agriculture and the environment, they called it agriculture, natural resources, and wildlife. So they sort of put their own spin on it to make it fit their county.
Yeah, and a couple of things to keep in mind when you're preparing your plan of work. Make sure that you go in, if you're thinking that you're going to just gently revise, as I mentioned, you have several new major programs that have been added to each one of the program areas, and you've had several that are removed, that are no longer there. So you want to make sure you take a look at it and make those updates, because as we go forward, 6 months from now or next year this time, and you're wanting to report to the same major program and it's not there. The other thing that we see is people just automatically assume that, oh, if we don't have any changes, then we don't need to go in and even review the plan of work. You still need to go in and review it and acknowledge that you looked at it, made a few changes, because if the plan of work contact does not go in to even review and just automatically assume that it's going to carry over, then it's going to show on our end and the district director's end that your plan of work was not revised, it was not updated. So even if you have very minimal changes, whoever that contact person is, or if it's several agents looking at it to make some changes, that needs to be done during this window of time. Otherwise, there will be a summary provided to the district director of the counties that did not update their plans of work. So,
Ken, were you going to mention affirmative action dates?
The affirmative action dates, now those have not changed. The affirmative action report and plan, the deadline for that is still June 30. And part of that is because with that information, now that a lot of that information remains the same as far as the summary is concerned, but 8 counties should have updated numbers for the council representation, race and gender of those individuals that they can put into the report. And then the plan is what you're planning to do for next year. So there's really not a lot of hindrance as it is with the plan of work where you're having to engage clientele. That the affirmative action plan and report should be something that could be done within that given timeline as we have it set for June 30. The other reports, sorry to say, but those are still holding. So for the statistical success stories, those are still due July 1. So,
but as you do your plan of work, think about how you're reaching those underserved audiences. So when we're talking about activities here, you want to also include your newsletters, social media posts, because those are ways that you're trying to reach some of those underserved audiences that you're unable to normally. Especially if you're in a county with a lot of commuters, for example. So those commuters aren't going to be able to have time to come to your programs, but you're reaching them by newsletters, social media, local newspaper articles, and things like that. So don't forget about those kind of activities include those underserved audiences as you develop that plan of work.
Mhm. And we are, as you mentioned that, and I noticed a lot of people are having to jump off here, but we're just sharing now. So if you have to leave, no problem. We're wrapping up here. But as Pam mentioned, underrepresented audiences, hopefully most of you saw an email come out about all reasonable efforts, and now you can document that information in CURS. So we typically ask for you to have that file in the office, and you still need that. But as you're working with audiences today, for example, and you realize that, wow, you know, this is an underserved audience right here that we're reaching out, we're putting forth that extra effort, that could be reported as an activity for today. And you can also go in and check the box that it was an all reasonable effort. And so we can have that information flagged for later to sort through the data, because it is information that's requested by various entities at any time as to folks wanting to know what Extension's doing. So just wanted to mention that. Well,
Right.
looks like folks are jumping off here. We really appreciate your time today, and we're very excited about so many people really wanting to improve or continue to expand upon their plans of work. So this is great.
All right. If you want some more additional help, go to those logic model trainings that are coming up at 1:30 on the 16th, 9:30 on the 21st, or at 2 p.m. on the 21st. Those are the next 3 that are coming up.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop recording here.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One quick question. This is Janie from Hart County.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I was just curious. We don't have an ag agent currently, and it's not looking like we're getting one in the next little bit. Hopefully within the 4 years. But how do you handle that whenever, like, do you just incorporate them into it, or
I would say yes.
4-year plan of work. So
That's why I went over where all the resources were for every program area, because there's a lot of counties that are in your situation, Janie, where you don't have an ag agent. And when you do get one, it's very helpful if you have a plan of work for them to start, it's a base to start from.
Okay, because I just didn't know. I mean, like, they might come on board and, we go in the horticulture, in the hort direction, and they wanted to go in the beef direction. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's why you have your annual updates. So you may be moving full speed ahead for this year with things that you've already indicated. And I know it was a blur, but we kind of talked a little bit about this during core training in that specific session around the plan of work, where we say new agents, you're coming in, you're